The warning that fell on deaf ears. The great hall of the Galactic Council was silent. Not the peaceful kind of quiet you might find in a library, but the heavy, dangerous silence that comes before a storm. Ambassador Zektar of the Hegemony Empire sat in his floating chair, his forearms crossed in annoyance. His purple skin was darker than usual, a sure sign he was getting angry. "You cannot be serious," he said, his voice echoing off the crystal walls. "You want us to treat these humans as equals?" Elder Mordin, the ancient leader of the council, did not move from his position at the center of the hall. His species had lived for thousands of years, and his weathered face showed every day of it. When he spoke, his voice was like distant thunder. "I am more serious than I have ever been in my 3,000 years of life," Mordin said slowly. "The humans are not what they appear to be. They are not just another primitive species playing with fire and metal tools." Around the hall, representatives from dozens of alien species murmured to each other. Some laughed. Others rolled their many eyes. A few species that looked like giant insects clicked their mandibles in amusement. Ambassador Vexira from the Stellar Federation leaned forward in her chair. Her tentacles writhed with barely contained laughter. "Elder Mordin, with all due respect, we have studied the humans for 50 of their years. They are barely past nuclear technology. They cannot even travel to their own moon consistently. They fight wars over pieces of dirt and colored cloth. How can they possibly be a threat to species that have traveled the stars for millennia?" The elder's ancient eyes seemed to glow in the dim light of the hall. "Because you do not understand what you are looking at. You see their primitive weapons and think they are weak. You see their small planet and think they are limited. You see their short lives and think they are insignificant." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But I have lived long enough to see patterns. I have watched species rise and fall across the galaxy, and I tell you now, there is something different about the humans, something that makes them more dangerous than any species we have ever encountered." Zektar's laugh was like breaking glass. "Dangerous? Elder, they cannot even agree on what to do about their planet's changing weather. Half of them still believe their world is flat. What could they possibly do to us?" The question hung in the air like a poison cloud. Elder Mordin closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, they seemed to look not at the assembled aliens, but through them, into a future only he could see. "They do not give up," he said quietly. "Ever. When other species face impossible odds, they surrender or negotiate or run away. Humans, they get angry. They get creative. They find a way to win, even when winning should be impossible." "That is just a fairy tale," scoffed Commander Grix from the Dominion fleet. His species looked like walking sharks, all teeth and muscle. "We have conquered 100 worlds. We know what real warriors look like. These humans spend most of their time looking at small screens and eating processed food. They are soft." Elder Mordin stood up slowly. Despite his age, he was still tall and imposing. "Commander Grix, how many wars has your species fought?" "Dozens. We have never lost." "And how long do these wars typically last?" Grix thought for a moment. "Usually a few cycles, sometimes a full rotation around our sun, if the enemy is particularly stubborn." "The humans have been fighting wars for their entire recorded history," Mordin said. "They have been fighting for thousands of their years, not just against each other, but against their planet itself, against disease, against hunger, against the very elements. And they keep winning, because they are primitive and do not know better." Vexira interjected. "Once they develop proper technology, they will become civilized like the rest of us." The elder shook his head sadly. "You still do not understand. It is not primitiveness that drives them. It is something much more dangerous. It is hope." The word seemed to echo strangely in the great hall. Hope. Such a simple concept. But the way the elder said it made it sound like the name of a weapon. "I have watched them through their satellites," Mordin continued. "I have seen their soldiers fight impossible battles and win through sheer determination. I have seen their scientists solve problems that should take centuries in just a few years. I have seen their artists create beauty from the darkest tragedies. They do not just survive, they thrive in conditions that would destroy other species." "So what?" Ambassador Zektar stood up, his chair floating higher to match the elder's height. Even if they are stubborn, they are still limited to one small planet. They have no faster-than-light travel. They have no energy weapons. They have no shields. What can they possibly do to threaten the established order of the galaxy? Elder Morden was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. But somehow everyone in the vast hall could hear every word. They learn. The simple statement sent a chill through the assembled aliens, though most of them did not understand why. They learn faster than any species I have ever observed, the elder continued. Show them something once, and they will figure out how to do it better. Give them a problem, and they will not just solve it. They will find 10 different ways to solve it, then combine those solutions into something completely new. Enough of this foolishness, Zektar's voice boomed through the hall. I did not come here to listen to bedtime stories about primitive apes. The Hegemony Empire has plans for this sector of space, and we will not be deterred by superstitions and fears. Several other ambassadors nodded in agreement. The humans were far away, on the very edge of known space. They had resources that could be useful, and their planet was in a strategically important location. Why should advanced civilizations be afraid of cave dwellers with nuclear weapons? Elder Morden looked around the hall one final time. He saw closed minds and greedy eyes. He saw species that had grown comfortable with their power and could not imagine anything challenging them. He saw the same arrogance that had led to the fall of dozens of previous galactic empires. Then I have done my duty, he said quietly. I have given you the warning. When the time comes, remember that you chose not to listen. As the elder walked slowly from the hall, Ambassador Zektar turned to his allies. Well, that was a waste of time. Commander Grix, how long would it take your fleet to reach the human home system? The shark-like alien smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. 6 months if we take our time. The humans will not even know we are coming until we are already there. Perfect. We will give them one chance to surrender peacefully. If they refuse, we will show them what happens when primitive species stand in the way of progress. Behind them, Elder Morden's footsteps echoed in the empty corridor. The old being did not look back. He had seen this scene before in different times and places. Species that thought they were invincible. Civilizations that believed their technology made them untouchable. They never learned until it was too late. And now, the humans would teach them the same lesson they had taught every other threat they had ever faced. The hard way. First contact goes very wrong. 6 months later, Commander Grix stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Hunger. Through the massive view screen, he could see the blue and green marble that the humans called Earth. It looked peaceful from this distance. Pretty even. It was hard to believe that Elder Morden had been so worried about the creatures living on this tiny world. Sir, reported his navigation officer, we are in position. The human detection systems are primitive. They cannot see us unless we want them to. Grix nodded with satisfaction. His fleet of 50 warships hung in space just outside the human solar system. Each ship was larger than the biggest cities on the planet below. Each ship carried enough firepower to turn continents into glass. Have they noticed us yet? He asked. Negative, sir. Their space monitoring is focused on asteroids and comets. They are not looking for anything as advanced as our ships. Good. Open a communication channel to the planet. Let us get this over with quickly. The communication officer, a creature that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a computer, worked at his console for several minutes. Channel open, sir. We are broadcasting on all their communication frequencies. Grix straightened his uniform and put on his most intimidating expression. This part was always easy. Primitive species were usually so shocked by first contact that they surrendered immediately. Attention, inhabitants of the planet you call Earth, he began. I am Commander Grix of the Hegemony Empire. You are now under our protection and authority. You will prepare to receive our representatives within the next rotation of your planet. Any resistance will be met with immediate and overwhelming force. This is your only warning. He cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. How long do you think it will take them to respond? Based on our studies of their psychology, probably several of their hours. They will need time to panic, argue among themselves, and eventually realize they have no choice but to submit. Grix settled back in his command chair. Wake me when they surrender. This should not take long, but down on Earth, the reaction was not what the aliens expected. In the Situation Room beneath the White House, President Sarah Chen stared at the recording of the alien transmission. Around the table sat the leaders of every major nation on Earth, connected by secure video links. The mood was not panic, as Grix had predicted. It was something else entirely. "Well," said President Chen, her voice calm and steady, "this is interesting." The Russian Premier Viktor Petrov was the first to speak. "They want us to surrender, just like that, without even asking what we want. Did you notice how they said your only warning?" Added the Chinese President Li Wei. "Very polite of them to let us know they do not plan to negotiate." Prime Minister Elizabeth Harper of the United Kingdom leaned forward. "The question is, what do we do about it? They obviously have superior technology. Those ships are massive. Are they, though?" President Chen turned to Dr. Maria Santos, the head of NASA. "What's your assessment?" Dr. Santos had been studying the sensor data for the past hour. "Large, yes. Impressive, definitely. But there's something odd about them. They're using very old-fashioned communication methods. Radio waves, basically. If they were really advanced, wouldn't they use something more sophisticated?" General James Morrison, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, spoke up. "Maybe they're using technology we can understand on purpose, trying to seem friendly. By threatening to destroy us?" President Chen raised an eyebrow. "That's not very friendly." The Indian Prime Minister, Raj Patel, had been quiet until now. "There is something else to consider. They said this is our only warning. That suggests they are used to species that surrender immediately. They may not be prepared for any other response." A slow smile spread across President Chen's face. "You know what? I think we should surprise them." "What do you have in mind?" asked the French president. "Dr. Santos, how long would it take to get a message back to them?" "Almost instantaneous. Radio waves travel at light speed." "Good. Open a channel." A few minutes later, the communication was ready. President Chen looked directly into the camera, her expression serious but not afraid. "Commander Grix of the Hegemony Empire. This is President Sarah Chen of the United Nations of Earth. We have received your message. We appreciate the advance notice of your arrival. However, we are afraid we must decline your generous offer of protection and authority." She paused for effect. "You see, we already have protection and authority. It is called humanity, and it has served us well for thousands of years. If you would like to establish diplomatic relations, we would be happy to discuss that possibility. But surrender is not on the table. We look forward to your response." The transmission ended, and silence filled the Situation Room. "Think that will get their attention?" asked General Morrison. "Oh, I think it will get their attention," President Chen replied. "The question is, what will they do about it?" On the Eternal Hunger, Commander Grix stared at the view screen in disbelief. Around him, his bridge crew was equally stunned. In 50 years of conquest, they had never received a response like this. They said no. The communication officer reported unnecessarily. "I heard what they said," Grix snapped. "The question is, how is that possible? Do they not understand the situation? We have 50 warships. We could destroy their entire planet." "Perhaps they are too primitive to understand the threat," suggested the tactical officer. Grix thought about this for a moment. It was possible. Some species were simply too stupid to know when they were beaten. "Send another message. Make the threat more explicit." This time, Grix's message was accompanied by a demonstration. One of his smaller ships fired a warning shot at an asteroid near Earth's moon. The asteroid, about the size of a football stadium, simply vanished in a flash of light. "Now do you understand?" Grix broadcast. "We can do the same to your cities, your mountains, your entire planet. Surrender now or face the consequences." The response came back within an hour. "Commander Grix, this is President Chen again. Thank you for the demonstration. Very impressive. However, our answer remains the same. We suggest you consider leaving our solar system peacefully. This is your only warning." Grix's purple skin turned almost black with rage. "They are threatening us. These primitive apes are threatening the Hegemony Empire." "Sir," his science officer spoke up nervously, "perhaps we should reconsider. Elder Morden did warn about the humans. Elder Morden is a senile old fool," Grix roared, "and I will not be threatened by creatures who have barely learned to leave their own planet. Prepare the fleet for attack. We will show these humans what happens when inferior species defy their betters. But as the fleet moved into attack position, none of them noticed the small, almost invisible objects that were already moving through their formation. The humans had been busy during the 6 months it took the alien fleet to arrive. Very busy indeed. The humans fight back. "Sir, we are reading massive energy buildups from all human population centers," reported the sensor officer on the Eternal Hunger. His voice was confused, almost worried. "They appear to be powering up some kind of defensive systems." Commander Grix laughed, but it sounded forced. "Defensive systems? What could they possibly have that would threaten us? Their most advanced weapons are primitive chemical rockets. That is what our intelligence reports said, sir. But these readings are unlike anything in our database." On the view screen, Earth looked different now. Lights were flickering across the continents in patterns that had not been there before. Cities that had been dark were now blazing with energy signatures that hurt to look at directly. "It does not matter," Grix said firmly. "Whatever they have built, it cannot match our technology. Begin the attack. Target their largest cities first." But before his ships could fire, something impossible happened. The space around the fleet filled with explosions. "Shields up!" Grix shouted, but it was too late. The first wave of human attacks had already hit. 3 of his warships were simply gone, reduced to expanding clouds of metal and gas. "Report. Where did those attacks come from?" "Unknown, sir. I am not detecting any human ships or launch signatures. It is as if the weapons came from nowhere." Another wave of explosions rocked the fleet. This time 5 ships were destroyed, then 10. The Eternal Hunger shook as something hit its shields with the force of a small star. "How is this possible?" Grix demanded. "They do not have this technology." Down on Earth, in a bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Elena Vasquez watched the battle on her screens with grim satisfaction. Around her, hundreds of technicians worked at consoles that would have looked like magic to the aliens above. "Status report," she called out. "Wave 1 successful. Dr. Vasquez, we got 12 of their ships before they could react. Wave 2 just hit. We're up to 17 confirmed kills. And our hunters? All operational. The aliens still cannot detect them." Dr. Vasquez smiled. The hunters were humanity's secret weapon, developed in complete secrecy over the past 6 months. They were tiny spacecraft, no bigger than a car, but packed with technology that would have made the alien scientists weep with envy. The secret was simple. Humans had been watching the galactic community for much longer than anyone realized. 50 years ago, when the first alien signals had been detected by human radio telescopes, governments around the world had made a decision. Instead of trying to contact the aliens, they would watch and learn. Hidden facilities around the world had been monitoring alien communications, studying their technology, and preparing for this exact situation. The aliens thought humans were primitive because humans wanted them to think that. Every missile test, every satellite launch, every public display of human technology had been carefully designed to hide the truth. Humanity had been preparing for war. "Launch Wave 3, Dr. Vasquez ordered. Focus on their command ships." In space, Commander Grix was beginning to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. His fleet of 50 ships was down to 30, and he still had no idea what was killing them. "Sir," his tactical officer shouted, "I am detecting small objects throughout the fleet. They appear to be some kind of stealth ships." "Impossible. Our sensors are the most advanced in the galaxy." "They are using technology we have never seen before, sir. It is like they are bending light itself around their ships." Actually, that was exactly what they were doing. Human scientists had cracked the secret of optical camouflage decades earlier. They had just never told anyone about it. The next wave of attacks was even more devastating. The alien shields, designed to stop energy weapons and physical projectiles, were useless against weapons that attacked reality itself at the quantum level. "We need to retreat," the sensor officer called out. "We are losing ships faster than we can count them." But Grix was too proud and too angry to retreat. "No, we are the hegemony empire. We do not run from primitive apes. All ships target the planet itself. If we cannot defeat their ships, we will destroy their world." It was the worst decision he could have made. The moment his remaining ships turned their weapons toward Earth, every single human facility on the planet went active at once. Military bases, research centers, even ordinary cities revealed weapon systems that had been hidden for decades. The sky around Earth lit up like the inside of a star. "Sir," the communication officer screamed over the noise of alarms and explosions. "I am receiving a transmission from the planet. Put it through." President Chen's face appeared on the screen, but she was no longer in the White House Situation Room. She was standing in what looked like a command center from a science fiction movie. Behind her, displays showed tactical information that made the alien computers look like toys. "Commander Grix," she said calmly, "this is your final chance. Leave our system now, and we will allow your remaining ships to return home safely. Continue this attack, and we will destroy every single one of you." Grix stared at her in disbelief. You are hiding this, all of this, but our intelligence reports were exactly what we wanted you to see," President Chen replied. "Did you really think a species that conquered an entire planet would not be able to hide a few secrets from aliens who barely bothered to look?" The truth was even more shocking than Grix could imagine. Humanity had not just been hiding advanced weapons. They had been deliberately showing the aliens primitive technology while developing things that were generations ahead of anything in the galaxy. "This is impossible," Grix shouted. "You are barely past nuclear technology." "Nuclear technology?" President Chen actually laughed. "Commander, we figured out how to split atoms 70 years ago. We figured out how to manipulate space-time itself 30 years ago. We have been working on reality manipulation for the past decade. Your ships are impressive, but they are still limited by physics as you understand it." On the tactical display, Grix could see that he now had only 15 ships left. 15 ships out of 50, and the humans were just getting started. "The question is," President Chen continued, "what will you choose? Retreat and live, or continue fighting and become another lesson for the next aliens who think humans are easy prey?" For the first time in his life, Commander Grix understood what Elder Morden had been trying to tell the Galactic Council. The humans were not just dangerous because they did not give up. They were dangerous because they had been preparing for this moment for longer than anyone had realized, and they were very, very good at war. When humans get serious, Commander Grix made his choice. Instead of retreating, he ordered his remaining 15 ships to press the attack. It was the last mistake he would ever make. "All ships, fire everything," he screamed into his communicator. "Target their planet. If we cannot defeat them, we will at least make them pay for their insolence." But the humans had been expecting this exact response. The moment the alien ships opened fire on Earth, something extraordinary happened. The space around the planet began to change. Light bent in impossible directions. The stars themselves seemed to shift position. "What is happening?" demanded the alien tactical officer, staring at readings that made no sense. The answer came from an unexpected source. On the communication screen, President Chen was still watching them, but now she was not alone. Behind her stood a figure that made every alien on the bridge gasp in recognition. Elder Morden. "Hello, Commander Grix," the ancient being said sadly. "I tried to warn your government. I tried to explain why humanity should be left alone. But you would not listen. You are working with them." Grix could barely speak. The idea of a Galactic Council elder cooperating with a primitive species was beyond comprehension. "I am not working with them," Morden replied. "I am learning from them, as I have been for the past 50 years. The truth hit Grix like a physical blow. The humans had not just been hiding their technology from the galactic community. They had been working directly with one of the most powerful beings in the known universe. "You see, Commander," President Chen continued, "Elder Morden contacted us 75 years ago. He warned us that other species would eventually come to our world, and that they would not come in peace. He offered to help us prepare, but why?" Grix whispered. Morden's ancient eyes were filled with a sadness that seemed to echo across the centuries. "Because I have seen this story before. Species become powerful, then arrogant. Then they encounter something they cannot understand or control. Usually it ends with everyone dead. The humans are different," he continued. They asked me not just how to build better weapons, but how to avoid using them. They spent 50 years trying to find ways to solve problems without violence, but they also prepared for the possibility that violence would be necessary. As if to emphasize his point, the space around the alien fleet continued to warp and shift. Grix realized with growing horror that his ships were no longer in normal space. Somehow, the humans had moved the entire battle into a pocket dimension where they controlled all the rules. "This is impossible," he said again, but the words sounded hollow even to him. "No," President Chen said firmly. "This is what happens when you threaten the survival of an entire species. This is what happens when you mistake caution for weakness. This is what happens when you ignore warnings from people who are trying to help you." On Earth, Dr. Vasquez watched the alien ships struggle uselessly against weapons that existed outside their understanding of reality. The humans had spent decades studying not just alien technology, but alien psychology. They knew exactly how species like the Hegemony Empire would react to resistance. "Phase 4 is ready," her assistant reported. "Shall we proceed?" Dr. Vasquez hesitated. Phase 4 was the plan that would end this conflict permanently, but it would also send a message to the entire galaxy about what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. "Do it," she said quietly. In the pocket dimension around Earth, reality began to rewrite itself. The alien ships found their weapons turning to dust. Their shields became soap bubbles. Their engines stopped working not because they were broken, but because the physical laws that made them possible no longer applied in this space. "We surrender," Grix finally screamed. "Please, we surrender." But President Chen shook her head. "I am sorry, Commander, but surrender is no longer an option. You had your chance to leave peacefully. You chose war instead. Then what do you want?" "We want you to go home," she said simply. "We want you to tell everyone exactly what happened here. We want the entire galaxy to understand that Earth is not a planet to be conquered or exploited or threatened. And if we refuse?" President Chen's expression did not change, but something in her eyes made every alien on the bridge take a step backward. "Then you will not be going home at all." The remaining alien ships hung in space, completely helpless. Their crews were not dead, but they might as well have been. They could not fight. They could not flee. They could not even communicate with the outside universe. They could only wait and listen, as the humans explained exactly how outmatched they had been from the very beginning. "Your intelligence report said we had primitive nuclear weapons," President Chen continued. "That was true 70 years ago. Your report said we could barely reach our own moon. That was true 50 years ago. Your report said we had no faster-than-light travel. That was never true." To prove her point, she gestured toward the view screen. Beyond the trapped alien ships, space began to fill with new contacts. Ships that looked nothing like the crude human vessels the aliens had studied. Sleek, elegant craft that moved through space like living things. "We have been visiting other star systems for 30 years, President Chen said. "We have been studying galactic civilization for 3 decades. We know about the slave worlds in the Cygnus sector. We know about the resource wars in the Andromeda colonies. We know about the experiments on sentient species in the hidden laboratories of the core worlds. Each revelation hit the aliens like a physical blow. Humanity had not just been hiding their technology, they had been gathering intelligence on the entire galactic community. And we know," President Chen continued, "that the Galactic Council has been looking for a way to stop the expansion of empires like yours for centuries. They just never had the tools to do it." She smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Now they do." Elder Morden stepped forward. "Commander Grix, when you return to your government, you will carry a message from the Galactic Council. Any species that attempts to conquer or enslave other worlds will face the same fate that befell your fleet here today." "You cannot be serious," Grix whispered. "You would give these weapons to the Council?" "We would not give them," President Chen corrected. "We would use them ourselves. Earth has agreed to become the enforcement arm of the Galactic Council. Any species that threatens peaceful worlds will have to deal with us." The implications were staggering. Humanity, the species that had been dismissed as primitive and irrelevant, was now positioned to become the most powerful military force in the galaxy. "But why?" Grix asked desperately. "Why would you involve yourselves in galactic politics? You could stay on your world and be safe. President Chen looked at him with something that might have been pity. Because someone has to, she said simply. Someone has to stand up for the species that cannot defend themselves. Someone has to make sure that bullies like you learn that actions have consequences. She paused, letting her words sink in. And because humans have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We are not going to do nothing. As the pocket dimension began to dissolve around them, returning the alien ships to normal space, Commander Grix realized that everything had changed, not just for his fleet or his empire, but for the entire galaxy. The humans were no longer hiding, and the universe would never be the same. The new Galactic Order, 3 months after the Battle of Earth. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was packed fuller than it had been in centuries. Representatives from every known species were present, and for the first time in the Council's history, there was a new delegation at the center of the hall, the humans. President Chen sat calmly in the chair that had been specially made for Earth's representative. Around her stood a team of advisors who looked unremarkable to most of the assembled aliens. But those who had studied the reports from Commander Grix knew better. These ordinary-looking humans had just rewritten the balance of power in the galaxy. Elder Morden stood to address the assembly. Despite his great age, he looked more energetic than he had in years. "My fellow representatives," he began, "we are here today to discuss the proposal that has been before us for the past 3 standard months. The question is simple. Should the human species be granted authority to intervene in conflicts throughout the galaxy?" The murmur that ran through the assembly was like distant thunder. Some species were clearly in favor of the proposal. Others looked terrified at the idea. Ambassador Zektar, who had somehow survived the political fallout from the disastrous attack on Earth, stood up slowly. His purple skin was pale, and his forearms shook slightly. "Elder Morden," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "the Hegemony Empire has reviewed the evidence from the engagement at Earth. We withdraw our objections to human involvement in galactic affairs." The admission sent shockwaves through the hall. The Hegemony Empire had been one of the most vocal opponents of the human proposal. Their surrender was a clear sign of how completely the situation had changed. "Thank you, Ambassador Zektar," Morden replied. "Are there any other objections?" For a long moment no one spoke. Then, from the back of the hall, a new voice spoke up. "I have a question." Every head turned to look at the speaker. It was Ambassador Kjern of the Free Worlds Alliance, a peaceful coalition of smaller species that had been victims of hegemony aggression for decades. "Please proceed." "Ambassador Kjern," Morden said, "my question is for the humans." Kjern continued, his insectoid features clicking nervously. "You have demonstrated that you possess overwhelming military power. What guarantee do we have that you will not use this power to become conquerors yourselves?" It was the question that everyone wanted to ask, but had been afraid to voice. President Chen stood up slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. "Ambassador Kjern," she said, "that is an excellent question. And the answer is simple. You have no guarantee except our word." The honesty of the response surprised many in the hall. Most species would have made grand promises or signed elaborate treaties. However, President Chen continued, "I can offer you something better than guarantees. I can offer you results." She gestured toward the large display screens around the hall. Immediately they filled with images from across the galaxy. In the past 3 months, human forces have intervened in 14 conflicts. In every case, we have stopped the aggression, protected the innocent, and then withdrawn completely. We have taken no territory, demanded no tribute, and established no permanent bases. The images showed human ships arriving at battle sites, quickly overwhelming the aggressors, and then disappearing as soon as the immediate threat was neutralized. "We have freed the slave colonies in the Cygnus sector," President Chen continued. "We have ended the resource wars in the Andromeda region. We have shut down the illegal experimentation facilities in the core worlds. And in every single case, we have turned control back over to the legitimate governments or to the Galactic Council itself." Ambassador Karn's mandibles clicked in what his species considered a smile. Impressive. But surely you must want something in return for these services. President Chen nodded. We do want something. We want to be left alone to develop our civilization in peace. We want the same thing for every other peaceful species in the galaxy. And we want to make sure that no species ever again has to face the choice between slavery and extinction. She paused, looking around the great hall at the assembled representatives. We do not want to rule the galaxy, she said firmly. We have our own planet to take care of, our own problems to solve, our own future to build. But we will not stand by and watch while other species suffer under the boot of tyranny. From his seat in the hegemony delegation, Commander Grix watched the proceedings with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. He had returned home with the few surviving ships from his fleet, expecting to face court-martial or execution. Instead, he had found his government in complete chaos. The hegemony empire had built its power on the threat of overwhelming force. Their enemies surrendered because they knew resistance was hopeless, but the humans had shattered that image of invincibility in a single battle. Worse, the humans had made it clear that they would respond to any further aggression with even more devastating force. The pocket dimension technology they had demonstrated was beyond anything the hegemony could understand, let alone counter. Commander Grix, Elder Mordin's voice interrupted his thoughts. Your government has submitted a formal statement regarding future hegemony policy. Would you please read it to the assembly? Grix stood up slowly, his hands shaking as he held the official document. The words seemed to burn his throat as he spoke them. The hegemony empire formally renounces all claims to territory outside our original home system. We commit to releasing all subject species under our control and paying reparations for damages caused by our expansion policies. We accept human oversight of our military forces and pledge to resolve all future disputes through Galactic Council mediation. The silence that followed was deafening. The hegemony empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, had just surrendered unconditionally. Thank you, Commander, Mordin said gently. I know that was not easy for you to say. Grix sat down heavily, looking older than his years. Around the hall, other representatives from aggressive species were shifting nervously in their seats. The message was clear. What had happened to the hegemony could happen to any of them. Before we proceed to the final vote, Mordin continued, I believe President Chen has something she would like to add. The human leader stood up again, but this time her expression was softer, more thoughtful. I want to say something to those of you who are afraid of what humanity might become, she began. Your fear is understandable. Throughout galactic history, powerful species have always used their strength to dominate others. It is a pattern that has repeated itself over and over again. She looked directly at some of the more worried representatives. But humans are different, and I will tell you why. We have something that most species lose when they become powerful. We remember what it feels like to be weak. The words echoed strangely in the Great Hall. Most species developed interstellar travel early in their history before they had experienced real hardship or struggle. Humans were unique in having spent millennia fighting for survival on their own world. We remember being hungry, President Chen continued. We remember being afraid. We remember what it feels like to face extinction and find the strength to survive anyway. Those memories make us protective of others who face the same struggles. She gestured toward the smaller delegations scattered throughout the hall. We do not see weak species as easy targets. We see them as ourselves from 1,000 years ago, and we will defend them with the same determination that we once used to defend ourselves. Ambassador Curran clicked his mandibles again. And what of those who attack you directly? What of those who threaten Earth itself? President Chen's expression grew cold. Anyone who threatens humanity or our allies will discover exactly why Elder Mordin tried so hard to warn everyone to leave us alone. The threat was delivered quietly, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. Everyone in the hall understood that the humans had shown remarkable restraint so far. They also understood that this restraint had limits. The vote is now called, Elder Mordin announced. All those in favor of granting humans enforcement authority under Galactic Council oversight? The response was overwhelming. Even species that had initially opposed the proposal now voted in favor. The alternative, facing human intervention without council oversight, was far more frightening. The measure passes unanimously, Morden declared. From this day forward, the human species is authorized to act as the military arm of the Galactic Council. May the galaxy know peace through their strength. As the assembly began to break up, many of the representatives approached President Chen to introduce themselves and establish diplomatic relations. But a few, including Commander Grix, lingered in the hall. "President Chen," Grix said quietly when they were alone, "may I ask you something?" "Of course, your people. The way you fight, the technology you used against us. Is this what you were like when you fought each other on your own world?" President Chen considered the question for a long moment. "Actually, no. When we fought each other, we held back. We were careful not to damage our planet too badly or to completely destroy our enemies, because we all had to live together afterward." She looked directly into his alien eyes. "What you experienced was what happens when humans fight for the survival of everyone and everything we care about. What you experienced was us taking the gloves off." Grix shuddered, and for the first time, he truly understood Elder Morden's warning. The humans were not dangerous because they were aggressive. They were dangerous because they had infinite capacity for violence, tempered by an equally infinite capacity for mercy, and they had just become the guardians of the entire galaxy. As President Chen walked out of the Great Hall, she passed Elder Morden, who was standing quietly by one of the massive windows, looking out at the stars. "Do you think we made the right choice?" she asked him. The ancient being smiled, and for the first time in centuries, it was a smile of genuine hope. "My dear President," he said softly, "I think you just saved us all." Outside the window, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the galaxy itself was breathing a sigh of relief. The age of conquest was over. The age of protection had begun, and it would be a very long time before anyone was foolish enough to ignore a warning from the Galactic Council again. The galaxy learned that day what Elder Morden had tried to warn them about. Humans don't just fight to win. They fight to make sure the fight never has to happen again. And when they're protecting something they care about, there is no force in the universe that can stop them.